Welcome to the Occult Rejects. We are two former secret society members who are determined to show the public the truth that occultism has been purposely integrated into every aspect of society, from politics to music, Hollywood, and science. This is used to manipulate the public as a whole and to protect the fake elite. The symbols are used all around us to affect world events, the public perception, our behavior, and even our future. We will translate the occult so that you have eyes to see. We reject their agenda to give you the tools to save yourself.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Occult Rejects with your hosts Lux
and the NY Patriot.
Today we have the awesome opportunity and privilege to have on Maddie from the Final Wake Up podcast. And after hearing some of the stuff that we've been covering about the Mormons, she reached out and had some interesting things to share. So welcome to the show, Maddie.
Hi.
What's going on? Thank you for finally coming on, too. I appreciate it.
No, thank you.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a good episode, and I think this is a good follow-up for what we were just covering. So I think might get to learn a little bit more of the stuff we didn't cover in the series because it was kind of off of Skinwalker Ranch, but very interesting, nevertheless.
Right. I listened to one or two of those. I need to finish them up. I'm curious to hear the connections.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a long story for sure.
There was like one whole episode, basically episode 3, that was just all the connections to Mormons. So
dang, yeah, I need to listen to that.
Very interesting. Yeah, but I guess, if you want, I guess let people know, about your stuff, and then we can maybe start going forward because you do have your own show as well. So, right?
Yeah. So I do have my own podcast. It's called The Final Wake Up. It started off. It used to have a different name. It was called Wake the F Up.
Nice. I like it.
And it was, I was very deep into New Age. So I started it kind of in that territory. And by episode 3, I was like, sorry guys, I got to cancel myself because I actually started reading the Bible for my very first time. Yeah. And I was like, oh no, I think I kind of got to step back on all of this occultish type stuff I'm in. So
yeah, it's interesting too because it seems like when people leave certain groups or religions, I've seen so many friends who have gone to the New Age stuff like right away as an answer to solve the things that they couldn't get answered in whatever group they were in before, and then it kind of backfires for some, and it's a crazy subject because with the New Age, I do think some of the New Age stuff is a psychological operation to just replace the religion or belief that you had before and just give you a brand new one.
Right.
So, very well said.
Yeah, I had no idea that it was like a religion of its own. I had no idea its roots back to, Satanism. What is it? Theosophy?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes with theosophy, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, and I didn't know any of that until some people that I followed who were like big coaches in the New Age and quantum leaping and all that stuff. They started saying like, oh my gosh, this is a deception. And I was like, you're full of it. And then I started looking into it and I was like, oh crap. I did not even realize.
Yeah, a lot of New Age stuff, I hate to say, is really just occultism, I think, fluffed up or woo-wooed.
Yeah.
Or altered in a way where they're totally misinforming you about what occultism is. So, yeah, I definitely encourage people not to stick their nose into the New Age stuff that's coming out from the mainstream New Age, because I think that's totally a lot of it's a psychological operation for sure.
Totally.
I agree. Yeah, I think like you kind of nailed it. I think a lot of stuff with New Age, just in my opinion, I know this is off the topic, but I do think it's very much kind of like we're going to tell you stuff and twist it, like tell you truths, but kind of put it in a way to where you misunderstand it again. The whole thing about hiding occultism again, you know what I'm saying? It's just, yeah. But,
yeah. So what type of content do you cover on your podcast? I'm very interested in that.
So I started it as like, because I'm a holistic health coach. That's what I do. I coach people because I went through my own health crisis, which I'm sure I'll end up talking about when I tell my story. But So I do coaching and courses, and I do like ebooks. So I talk about some of that in my podcast, but I also have really liked to just detail my transition out of New Age and like learning more about the Bible. Because coming from the Mormon religion, you know, they call themselves Christians. So when I left, I hated everything Christianity, hated the Bible, hated Jesus. I honestly hated God until I kind of formed my own God that was the universe, you know, in the New Age practices. But so I feel like a lot of people are scared to even go down that path or scared to feel like beginners because it seems like, oh, everyone already knows all the Bible stories or knows everything about Jesus, and it's like intimidating. So I wanted to use my podcast to be like, I'm starting a whole new way of life. I don't know what I'm doing. I know nothing about it. So I've kind of been detailing my transition out of New Age and into learning about the Bible and like comparing it to what I thought the Bible was from growing up Mormon.
Well, that's interesting.
It is very interesting. Yeah.
Wow. So
Good for you too.
I get.
Thank you.
Yeah, seriously, can't imagine. That had to be a hard ass journey. You know,
you went from Mormonism to New Age, and then, jeez, right?
Yeah. It's like you figure out you've been deceived one time, and you get these crazy spiritual trust issues, and then you think you're doing something that is just like pure and love and light, and then you find out you've been deceived again, and you have no idea, and it's like, I should have known better. Why did I not catch on to this?
Me and Lux talk about that all the time. We should have known better. How do we end up with it?
Yeah.
Seriously.
I was reading through some of the Golden Dawn material that was initially given to me when I first joined. And, you know, all these years later, going back and looking at these papers that I had on the day of initiation, it was like, dude, how stupid could I be? I knew that something was up. I knew something was weird, and I still went through with it and did it for a long time. So I think that it's sort of, they kind of set it up in a way where if you leave one thing, then you're going to go to another thing. And it's so hard to find the actual truth, right? Because everything's manipulated. Even when you look at the Bible, a lot of that is manipulated because they want to hide more of the truth. Right. So yeah, it's just, it's funny because we're all out here trying to find our way, I think, you know, just trying to go through the maze and the puzzle to figure out what's real and what's not true and, you know, do our best.
Totally.
Yeah, just trying to weave our way in and out of the matrix. So within it, really.
Right.
Seriously.
So enough of us babbling. So tell us sort of how did your journey start? Like, what was that like? Were you raised in the church? Tell us sort of like step one.
Okay, so I feel like most Mormons, I was born in Utah County. It's literally called Happy Valley. So it's just this bubble of Mormon culture. Like probably 99% of people here are Mormon. Maybe less now, but like growing up, that's definitely what it was like. So I had kind of a different story because everyone is pretty much generationally in the church. Like even a lot of my friends, they go back to like Brigham Young. Oh, wow. Like some of the original prophets are in their bloodlines. So yeah, it's very generational. But my parents, my dad his mom was from Greece and his dad was from Yugoslavia. So they moved to America, lived in California. I don't think they even really grew up with a religion. And then my mom grew up in Tennessee, and they met each other and kind of just decided like they went on their own search for truth. So they went to a couple different churches. They would like some for a while, and then they'd be like, you know, I don't really think that this is it. And my dad's sister, so my aunt, she joined the LDS church. I wish I knew more, but I wish that I knew her story. I don't know when she joined. I don't know why she joined. But so she already had like a foot in the door. My dad, I think, wanted to find a religion a little more deeply than my mom did. So she was okay with this trial and error. And my dad my mom went out of town. The Mormon missionaries came to my dad's door. So my mom was gone, I think, for maybe like weeks at a time. And while these missionaries came, he started having these like spiritual dream experiences. Kind of like it was definitely sleep paralysis. So in his mind, it was like the devil is fighting me right now because he doesn't want me to join this church. This must be the true church. So my dad joined the church while my mom was out of town.
Oh.
And she came back and was like,
What happened?
I'm sorry, what? Like,
Surprise.
what even is this? Yeah, surprise. So from the very get-go, my mom was kind of like, I think she was angry at my dad, and so that made her not want to pursue the church, because it was like, why would you go behind my back? So that's kind of how that started. My mom, over the years, never joined. I think my dad for sure thought she would at some point, but she still hasn't. It's been 35, 40 years now.
Oh, wow.
But so I grew up with only one parent being a member, and that is very rare around here.
Surprised.
But my mom, like, she was supportive. She would go to sacrament with us, which it's like, when you go to the Mormon church, it's like, it was 3 hours. They actually recently shortened it, but it was 3 hours long. The first hour was sacrament. You'd take the bread and the water. And then the next 2 hours were like, you go to your different little groups and have your teachings and lessons and all that. So my mom would come to sacrament, and, you know, me and my two sisters, they're both older than me. We were just raised in the church. It was everything we knew. We got baptized at 8 years old. And I just remember growing up, and there were different little things that would happen that made me question. Like, one of them was, I went to, it's either called Young Women's. I think it was maybe called Activity Days. I have a tough time remembering because it was so long ago, but basically the girls would get together and do an activity. And I remember going to a pool one time with them, and I wore a bikini, thinking nothing of it. I'm just a young girl. And the looks that I got from the teachers and from the other little girls, it was like, I almost felt like an alien. And they were judging me so deeply because I was wearing a bikini. I was the only one. Everyone else was in a one piece. So from that point, I think that's when I kind of realized, like, these people are kind of judgmental. Mm-hmm. And because my mom wasn't a member, as I would grow up, I didn't do the normal church things like everyone else. Like, people were so deeply in the church that they would go to girls camp every single summer, or they would do this thing called Trek. Everyone literally dresses up like pioneers and rolls around in wagons and like does apparently the trek that like Brigham Young and the pioneers did.
Oh,
so
wow. Now is that like the trek of, like, I know at one point I think they kind of like when they went to Utah, right? Is that what you're talking about?
I think that's what it is.
Yeah. I know there was I think they celebrate that kind of, like you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah, and I never did any of that stuff because to me it seemed kind of strange. Like, I didn't want to dress up like a pioneer and have to camp out. And my parents were kind of bougie, so it was like, oh, if you don't want to go camp out in the wilderness, like, you don't have to do that. And I was like, hey, awesome. But then everyone else looked at me like, what are you doing? Like, are you in the church or are you not?
Mm-hmm.
And so everyone was kind of iffy about me. I remember being in middle school and my friend's parents, just in front of all of our friends, we'd be having a good time, and it'd be like, so Maddie, I hear your mom's not a member. And it's like, wow. Okay, and like, does that matter? I was still so young and just confused by it. But yeah, they were pressuring my mom all the time. I would have missionaries come to my door. We had a general authority come, which is like, that's a big deal in the church. They're like one of the highest up leaders. He came trying to convert my mom. They assigned her to teach a class. She taught a class, not even as a member of the church, but she went into it with like an open mind, thinking, I will genuinely learn this stuff. I will teach it. And if I feel touched by the Spirit, or like this is the truth, maybe I'll join. So she did the whole thing, still didn't feel like it was it for her. And I just know my dad is crushed by it. But I remember being about 16 years old. And this is when I started hating church, because 3 hours every Sunday the men all talk like this. And this is how every person talks in the church.
You see, Warren Jeffers, whatever that guy's name was, that shit
Yeah,
that was on
Warren
Netflix. Everybody talked like that. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but it's like you just fall asleep every time you go. It's so boring. I never got anything out of it. So I started hating it. I would go to Sacrament just because I knew I could leave after and go get Taco Bell. And like slowly and slowly, I started drifting away from the church. And I just started asking my own questions. Like, I got baptized in this at 8 years old. I didn't know what I was doing. Like they pressure you at 8 years old, and it's like you have a covenant with God now, so you better, follow the rules and do everything you're supposed to. And it's like, I didn't know what I was getting myself into. So in my church classes, the times that I would go, I would start asking questions like that. Like, why are we baptized at 8 if we don't really know what we're doing? And it'd just be crickets. And people would look at me like, what are you saying? And it was so interesting to me. So yeah, I started getting a little bit more distant from the church, but it was still what I believed in. Like, I still 100% considered myself Mormon. And when I was 18, they send men on missions, young men, and they had lowered the age. So it was like all of my high school friends were getting their callings to go on their mission. And there's this thing called a farewell. So it's like all your friends, all your family, they come to your church, listen to the person going on their mission, like give a talk, say their goodbyes. There's a little party afterwards. And that was like every week for me because all of my friends were going on their missions. So I wasn't going to my own ward because I'd be hopping around everywhere saying goodbye to everybody. And I had graduated high school and decided that I needed to get out of this bubble. Like I could recognize that everyone here just lived this pattern of you're born, you get baptized at 8, you go through the temple, you go on your mission. As soon as you come back, you get married, you have lots of babies, and you do the same thing with them. And that was everybody, at least for the people not getting divorced, because they get married so young at like 20, 21 years old, and they're not ready for marriage, and then they end up getting divorced. But so I could just see this like toxic pattern, and I was like, I have to get out of this bubble. And so I decided to go to Texas Christian University. I wanted to go to Oregon, and my parents wouldn't let me because it was too liberal. So we thought that maybe like a Christian-based university would be all right. But I remember I just wanted like spiritual guidance because I was going by myself, and I was scared. I'd never really been out of Utah. So I went to my bishop asking for this thing called a patriarchal blessing. And basically the patriarch gives you a blessing. And now thinking about it, it's almost more like a psychic reading where like they're going to tell you your future and like the path that you're going to go on and what you'll do in life. And I really wanted that, just like support and confirmation. And I asked my bishop, and he said, you haven't been going to church. And I was like, no, I have. But my friends are going on their mission, so I've been going to farewells. So I've been in other wards. You just haven't seen me here. And he was like, well, I can't give it to you.
Real quick, if you don't mind me interrupting, it's only because I've seen the word ward and I've read it myself, and actually I didn't quite know what that word meant. Can you just explain what a ward is? Because I think I saw, like, one of the Myers, I think, was buried at LDS, and it mentioned ward or something like that. Mm-hmm. Can you explain what a ward is or whatever?
Yeah, it's basically like there's a church for every single neighborhood. So it's like this little section will all go to one building, and that's your ward. Like it's all of your community. Gotcha. And so all the different sections of neighborhoods have their own wards that they go to. Mm-hmm. And then in each ward you have a bishop, which is like the guy who runs that ward for whatever amount of time. I don't even know if they have training. That's a whole, we'll probably talk about that. It's a whole nother subject with the bishops and the bishop interviews, but.
It's like a district.
Yeah.
That's now you could, were you able to, like, I think you were just saying, you were telling some of the people that you were going to different wards. So you could go to a different church, and even if it was out of your district? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry. Just wanted to know.
Yeah, it is confusing. If I use like terminology that doesn't make sense, feel free to stop me.
No, it's all right. Yeah, okay, I will.
But so yeah, getting denied that spiritual blessing was my first time that I really felt slighted by the church. And it was like, okay, maybe the culture here just sucks. Maybe I just need to get out of Utah, and maybe then I'll be able to gain my own testimony. Because it's like you look at everyone else and everyone's wearing a mask. Everyone has this whole facade going on that they're perfect and they're so spiritual and they go to church every Sunday and they're doing everything right. So I would look at my peers and be like, these people have a spiritual connection here. Like, why does everyone know this church is true, but I don't? And I almost was mad at God. And I'm like, why not me? Like, why don't I get to have these spiritual experiences? So I thought, if I go to Texas by myself, I'll be able to go to the church by myself, away from the community, and then I'll be able to see if I actually have a testimony. So I did. I went to Texas. I went to church probably 3 times, and I got a boyfriend there. And I wanted to take him to church with me, and I was like so excited just to show him my background. I remember taking him to church, just like telling him have an open mind, you know. And then after the meeting, he sat me down and he was like, Maddie, that was the cultiest thing I have ever experienced. And I was like, what? Fuck. Really?
Oh, I came out and said that, damn.
He was blunt. He was very
yeah, that was being blunt.
And, you know, I'm thankful for him now, even though back then it was like earth shattering for me. I'm like, what do you mean culty? Like, I grew up in this. This isn't normal? I didn't know that wasn't normal. Because in the sacrament meetings, it's dead silent. Dead silent. Nobody claps. Nobody cheers. No one says amen. Nothing. It is dead silent. So I think he saw all of that going on and was like, what is happening?
I could get that.
Yeah, I definitely understand that, especially coming from the background that I do with the being involved in the church the whole entire time I was growing up. It wasn't the Mormon church, but it was a Christian church that they more or less, you know, the Mormon church and Protestant Christianity, a lot of their rituals or practices or services are all mirrored off of each other. So I was curious, for those early years, did you have to go like Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday, things like that? Were like events that seem to always keep you at the church, whether it be a prayer service or some type of teen meeting or things like that?
Yeah, I didn't. You know, I was kind of the odd one out because I had the one parent in and the one parent out. But everyone else, it's like you go for the 3 hours on Sunday. On Monday nights, you have an activity. On Wednesday nights, you have an activity. And then the whole church, none of it's paid. So they're calling on random people. And I know it's the people that, you know, they think are struggling or they haven't seen them in a while. And it's like, oh, God told me to give you the opportunity to give a talk in sacrament next week. So it's like they're constantly calling on people to basically volunteer their time and energy to come teach at the church.
Right. Wow.
Now, did they? You mentioned something before about the boys and stuff. They, what were the? Oh, you know what? I have a couple of questions. I'm trying to think which one's more important.
Go for it.
I'm just gonna go with this one actually in first. The Texas. Where in Texas, if you don't mind, did you go to?
It's in Fort Worth. It's like 40 minutes from Dallas, maybe.
All right. Where is that? Like, because I know I keep on screwing this guy's name up. The guy from that Netflix thing that was just on. What's his name again?
Sweet.
Yes.
Who, Brandon Fugel?
No.
We'll need to know more about him.
I was not expecting that. Yeah, well, whoever. I know that he thought that Texas was like, supposedly he was like bringing the people to Zion there, right? In El Dorado.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
on
I watched that.
On that El Dorado sign, when they show it, them entering El Dorado, right on the fucking sign on the side of it, it's just a gigantic Freemason sign. And I was
Really?
like, is there a
Yeah.
connection? Is that just a
Conspiracy or just a coincidence?
I didn't even notice that. But, oh my
Yeah,
God.
I'll send that shit to you. I saw that shit on the TV. I was like, yo, I paused that shit. I was like, wait a second. And then I went online and I literally just Googled welcome to El Dorado sign or some shit like that. And I found the same sign and it has a fucking Freemason thing right on the side of it telling you what lodge it is. And it says like ancient free and something. And I was like, And this guy's taking everybody there saying it's Zion.
Right.
Yep.
Oh, that's so interesting. I would
Yeah, I
love
was wondering
to-
like where in Texas, if maybe you were the same in El Dorado. Thought that would have been
No,
pretty
I
cool.
have no idea where El Dorado is, honestly. It seemed like it was a pretty small, kind of like middle of nowhere town, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, Fort Worth is pretty big.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So keep going with your story. I totally didn't mean to interrupt you, but like, so
No.
after this meeting where, you know, you bring your boyfriend there and he sees things that are strange, what was the next step?
So basically what happened from then is he started questioning me on things. And again, he was very, very liberal. So I think this was around 2016. So this was like in the heat of social debate was like gay marriage and stuff. And so he would press me on this kind of stuff. Like, do you believe in gay marriage? And I'd be like, no. He's like, hey, well, why not? I'm like, because the church, like, we don't believe in gay marriage. And he'd be like, okay, well, why? And I would just be blank. I was like, you know what? I actually don't know why I believe what I believe. I don't know why they teach this. And so I started like basically having my psyche fractured because it was like I didn't have questions or I didn't have answers to these really simple questions. And I started to realize like maybe I don't even believe in what I think I believe in. So I was like, basically from then on, the rug got pulled out from under me and it was like, I got to figure out what this church even says. Like, why do they believe these things? And why have I not been taught about their doctrine? Like, why do I not know why these are their beliefs? And I think around that time too, the church issued a policy change. And they'll say that these things are like revelation from God. But this policy made a lot of people upset. I don't even know why they made it, but the new policy was that gay people's children could not be a part of the church. And everyone was kind of like, why the discrimination? Like, why can't they be a part of the church? And especially because it was in the heat of social debate, people were really, really mad. And that was kind of when I was like, you know what? I think I just need to take a step back because something about this doesn't really feel right. So I took a step back. That's when I started like researching a little bit more, just finding out more about the history, because I didn't know anything about Joseph Smith. The only thing you hear about him is like every time someone bears their testimony, there's a whole day dedicated to it. So in sacrament meeting, it's the first Sunday of the month. It's just people volunteering to go up to the pulpit and telling their testimony. And every single one, I know this church is true. I know that Joseph Smith is a true prophet, blah, blah, blah. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. And then it's silence from everyone. And then someone else goes up and says the exact same thing. And that was really all I knew about him, was like, oh, he's the true prophet. But so then I started like Googling him, literally just Google. And it's like, oh, he had 35 wives? Huh? Like the church never told me this. And it's like, even just that alone is enough for you to be like, okay, I don't think I trust these people anymore. Like, that is a pretty big detail to leave out.
Was there sort of like a wrestling in your mind real quick? Was there a long process of being like, wait a minute, I'm seeing this on Google, but yet my whole entire life I've been told these good things about Smith. Like, I imagine the mental gymnastics that you had to go through to try to figure out which one was true. Google,
right.
All these other sources, or what you were told in the church.
Right, because like growing up in the church too, if someone were to try and bring up LDS history, they call it anti-Mormon. So it's like anyone says anything bad about the church, it's like, oh, well, there's an anti-Mormon. Like, don't listen to that person. So it was hard for me to read this information and be like, is this true or is this just anti-Mormon? And that's just like, brainwash right there.
Well, it's almost like with people with Scientology. It's like, when they go online, they don't want to like believe it, and they're already told it's like propaganda already. So
totally.
Yeah.
And in the temple, I never went through the temple because I was never worthy enough. But to go into the temple, you have to do these interviews with the bishop. One of the questions, they changed it recently. Somehow they always change the things that make them look bad. But one of the questions was, do you associate with non-Mormons? Associate. Like,
Wow.
what if you worked with a non-Mormon and you say yes, now you can't go in the temple.
Holy shit.
And if you don't go to the temple, you can't do the ordinances that get you to the celestial kingdom, the highest level of heaven. So it's like, if you want to be with God, you have to follow these rules. You have to pay your tithing. You can't associate with non-Mormons, on and on and on.
You used a term just a little while ago. You said that it was the celestial. So can you explain for us and the listeners, what is that?
Okay, so the Mormons believe that there are 3 different levels of heaven. There's I don't remember what order the bottom 2 go in, but there's the terrestrial, the telestial, and the celestial. And the celestial is the highest. It's like, apparently this is where God resides, and the people who make it there will be with God. The other people who are pretty good but not good enough in their life on earth will make it to like the middle kingdom, and then people who struggled will be in the lower kingdom. And apparently the lower kingdom is like, they say like Hitler will be there. But if you're a Mormon and then you deny the gospel or you leave the church, you're not going to the bottom one, but you're going to outer darkness. So this is like their hell. And it's like the worst sin imaginable is denying the gospel. So there's people in the church who have family members who will leave, and they fully believe that person's going to outer darkness and they're never going to see them again. So it's like, people here, if they leave the church, if they're questioning the church, they will keep that inside till their death so that their family doesn't find out. Either because 1, they'll disown them, or 2, they'll be literally heartbroken, thinking that their family won't be together forever. Because it's like a Mormon tagline, families will be together forever. There's a hymn. It's the whole thing. So if suddenly your family's not going to be together, it's a big, big deal. Which doesn't make sense, because if there's 3 levels of heaven, what if someone in your family goes to the lower level and you're in the higher level?
Yeah.
But they don't really explain the nuance there.
Makes me think of the Kabbalah with that.
Well, and the 3 degrees of heaven, Joseph Smith was a 3rd degree, to my knowledge, Mason. He may have gone higher, but people have said before that he probably based the 3 degrees of heaven on the 3 degrees of Masonry.
Right.
Yeah. I was even thinking of like whatever that is, Ain and then Ain Sof and Ain Sof or whatever, like the 3 levels of just of Kefa. Then the negative is existence. I was wondering if like it was even, who knows, and then or even the 3 levels of the tree. I mean, just very interesting.
No, I know what you're saying above Kether.
Yeah.
There being the 3 degrees. Yeah, and this stuff is really good to talk about, I think, because, people that I have communicated, I've said, hey, we're covering the Mormons, LDS. The majority of the public really believes that the LDS and Mormons are just another Christian sect. It's just another slightly different version. What Nazarenes are to Baptists to Methodists or whatever. It's just slightly different. But I think the more that people hear this information about how vastly different Mormonism is, that it would change a lot of Christians' minds and certainly the general public, because the Mormons and LDS go into some very crazy belief systems.
Mm-hmm.
I know that they even spoken about there being like a galactic council or where you could become sort of this god, where after you pass away, the god will then give you a planet or a solar system to rule over.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about that?
Yeah. Brigham Young, he was one of the first prophets. He actually said the only men that will attain godhood are those who enter into polygamy. And it was a belief that you take all of these wives so that when you get your own planet, you can procreate and populate that planet. So you're going to be a god over your children, you know, because they say, oh, well, we're God's children. He must have literally physically birthed us, but in the spirit world or whatever. So they believe that that's going to happen on their own planet with all of their wives, and they're going to be the god.
Wow.
And some Mormons don't know about that, and they'll be like, what are you talking about? And it's like, have you read your own doctrine? Probably not, because they're going to say it's anti-Mormon, but it's literally your own history and your own prophet's words.
So at what age were you taught that? Like, was that early on, or?
I was never taught that.
Okay.
Because they distance themselves from teachings that sound a little bit crazy. So they've totally denounced polygamy now, even though Joseph Smith, their true prophet, was doing polygamy himself.
Well, I find that one thing interesting that you even said about this, like this whole story right here. I think there is even like a cartoon that's supposed to be like an old cartoon that does show, I think, almost to that extent what you just covered. And I thought it was like so wild. I was like, I wonder if I even have to question this, but like but it did seem like authentic and real. Mm-hmm. So I do find that you're even saying it now and corroborating with it. So I find that interesting because it does even go into, I was just like, yo, this is even crazier than I thought it was.
No, yeah.
I was like, this is like some like weird, like, is this like some Scientology mixed with Muslim shit? Like, I was like, what the fuck?
Right.
No, yeah. I wish I knew more about Scientology because I've heard that Mormonism is similar to Jehovah's Witnesses, which again, I still don't know all that much about, but I wish I knew more about Scientology so I could draw those parallels too. Because even Mormons, they'll look at Jehovah's Witnesses and Scientology and be like, oh, those are cults. I'm like, do you know you teach very similar stuff and you operate in very similar ways? Might want to look into that.
You know, it was funny last night. I don't know what made me think about it. Maybe somebody mentioned to me or messaged me about a lady who did Lee Remini or whoever was doing the Scientology stuff. I was like, you know, just from the business aspect, I was like, the way like sometimes me and Lux, if we do like, you know, look into like a secret society, the way like, you know, we always go look at the numbers, the money, you know, business aspects stuff. And I was like, you know, just looking into them on that aspect could probably be really interesting for us to do one day. Mm-hmm. I was like, I'm sure we'll find CT Corp somewhere. You know, some shit. There seems to be this one company that's just like a constant connection throughout secret societies and companies that we've covered.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, and I think it even lined. Did any of that come up in the LDS?
Yeah,
it did. About their financial dealings. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's very weird. So when you look, just in short, all the different secret societies that we've looked into, they of course are, you know, registered companies, nonprofits, etc. But when you go to look at the Bizopedia information of who that registered agent is of that nonprofit or LLC, whatever, it always brings up the same registered agent, which is called the CT Corporation.
Well, yeah, like the corporate. There's like 3 or 4 that all have like the same words just mixed around, but the CT Corp is like it seems like the most constant. I mean, same thing. Yeah. They own the same thing. The registered agent for Twitter and Abercrombie and Fitch, who now has a moose logo. Now they also came up for the Moose Lodge when we looked into them. So is that like, you know, a stretch? Is that some weird shit? I don't know, but
not a stretch.
Yeah, it just seems like these companies, these registered agents, they go by a couple different names. Like NY was saying, the CT Corporation, the United States Corporation Company, the Corporation Company or something. And I'm not even making that up. Like that's literally what they're called. But all these different secret societies have the same registered agents, and LDS and Mormon, Brigham Young, all of the registered agents are CT Corporation or the company corporation, which is the same thing.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. They've got, because I have a whole section. I probably should have brought this up earlier, but I created this course called the Ex-Mormon Resource Course. Basically just thinking like when I was leaving the church, I was so lost and confused. It was so hard to find trustworthy information and know what the heck was real. So I made this course basically compiling all these different questions that a lot of Mormons ask and never get the answers to. But one of the sections in there is talking about tithing and how much money the church is worth, because you pay, well, they say pay 10%. Is that your gross income? Is that your net income? Like, what are you paying 10% on? But they make multiple billions of dollars each year just on the tithing. And they've stockpiled about $100 billion. And so people are saying, what's this money going to? And they'll like say that, oh, we spent 40 million on building these churches. And people are like, oh, that is so sweet. I'm like, 40 million is like 0.5% of that whole number. Where's the rest of the money going? But they're not transparent about any of it. So really nobody has any idea.
Yeah. And it just, them all having the same registered agents is just, it's like, I'm not making any claims, but if you were to try to want to move some money around between different groups that were all in the know, that would be the perfect way to do it. Especially when you look at the connections of, Joseph Smith and Masonry, and just how that's so integrated into Mormonism. It sort of seems like, okay, so when the Mormon church was just getting started, Masonry, which Joseph Smith was already a part of, was starting to get a really bad name because there was this political party that was starting to rise up in the United States called the Anti-Mason Party. And so our theory is that, okay,
was like the first third party ever, right?
It was the first third party of any real influence. Yeah. It was almost like the Masons said, oh crap, we're getting a bad name. We have to still keep doing what we're doing, but we're going to start churches. We're going to start different religions. We're going to start different, groups that don't seem to be Masonic, but at the heart of it, it really is Masonic. We'll just call ourselves something else to take the heat off for a while. So it kind of seems to me that could be one of the building blocks for Mormonism.
And
from Masonry than to try in your name.
Right.
And I know when we covered we covered a bunch of different secret societies and stuff, and like some of them, when you start to look at their financials, like didn't seem well off, and then and those would be like well-known ones or bigger orders. I think, like, put it this way, I think like the Shriners, I mean, they had money. And then, like, you never heard of the fucking Moose Lodge. We looked up the Moose Lodge, and they were, like, fucking even more loaded. Like, billions. And we were like, what the fuck? So, like, I've often wondered, like, you saw, like, I've even had people since we've done the Skinwalker Ranch series even hit me up and been like, yo, where are they even getting the funding for all these gigantic temples that they're making? Right. I've often wondered, and like me and Lux have said, is there money getting moved around within the secret societies through tax, because they're all non-for-profits. They probably all escape the taxes, move shit around. And I was like, I'm wondering, like, could whatever money that the Masons are fucking around with possibly fronting the Mormons?
I do wonder. I wouldn't even know how to find those connections, but definitely a possibility.
Yeah.
And like I said, all the boys go on missions. I recently realized that the church doesn't pay for these missions, which are basically, it's like 2 years of free slave labor.
That's basically what I was going to ask you about before. When I said I had other questions, I was going to ask you all about this. That's funny.
Yeah. It's like slave labor for 2 years. You have a strict schedule. You can't do anything fun. And they actually pay to go on the mission. And it was like, you used to not be able to call your family. You could only talk to them one day of the year. And people would have like mental breakdowns out there, obviously. And then people would come home early, and the culture just is like, oh, they must have messed up. They're not Mormon enough. Like, they don't have the spirit enough. But like, these poor boys are getting sent out at 18 years old, just anxiety ridden. And the church doesn't pay for like high quality medical care out there. So people are having issues, and they couldn't talk to their parents, and they're scared to come home because everyone's going to judge them. Meanwhile, the church is getting paid for them to go do that while they go rake up new members who are going to pay their tithing now too.
That's wild. They make them pay
big pyramid scheme.
You know what? I don't know why. Like, I know it's very different, but I guess maybe like on the land version, or it kind of reminds me of the Sea Org with the Scientologist again.
Yeah.
It's like, because if you join the Sea Org, oh, that's fucking, you're doing some serious shit. You're really trying to be the best. You go on a mission and you're in the missionary. Like, I guess you're expected to, I don't know. It's probably very mental.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting.
Yeah. It does have a lot of parallels. Like the structure of both of the Scientology and Mormonism do have pretty similar parallels. But I guess to get back to your story, so we left off when you were starting to question these things, and what was the next step? But like, what was the thing that made you say, okay, I'm done? And I know that in Mormonism and LDS, even I don't know, but even having one family member who was deeply involved with it, I'm sure there was a lot of, weighing of the heart, I guess you could say, to decide to leave. What was that like?
I think it might have been easier for me being away from everybody because I knew that I wasn't going to have that social pressure and all that judgment. Like, I was away from my family and my friends. So I kind of had like the space and the privacy to do my own thing for the first time ever. But I mean, I definitely thought about my dad. We still argue about it all the time. I'll bring these things up, and it's like, when you're convinced that it's true, it's like that cognitive dissonance. You can see something, you can see the evidence in front of your face, and it's like it's not even there. So I feel like that's mostly what I go up against, is like, I'll make these great points about the church, and people are like, well, I know it's true. I'm like, well, how do you know? Because I feel the spirit when I read the Book of Mormon. So they base truth off of their feelings, whereas I was trying to base truth off of their history and all this evidence. So I mean, I've been very logical my whole life. Like, I search for the truth. I do a lot of research, and other people just aren't really that way, especially not in the Mormon religion. But yeah, I think just finding out more information, I was like, I can't be a part of this anymore. I think there's a reason that I never had my own testimony. Like, I'm going to trust myself and figure out what it is that I believe in and have a reason to believe it, rather than just subscribe to a label that looks and feels good.
Mm-hmm.
So from there, anxiety, depression, just black hole in my life. Like, I didn't know if God was real. I didn't know what to believe in. I didn't know who to go to. I couldn't really talk to anybody about leaving the church. So that was when I started to dive into mindfulness and meditation and self-help books. And that was the road that led me down into New Age. So it was like, I started doing the meditation, and then I was using crystals for healing, which obviously didn't do anything. And and I just went down this whole road that, it led me to people like Eckhart Tolle. I was reading The Power of Now and A New Earth, and I was very much love and light and unity. Started basically worshiping the earth and the elements, and I was meditating. I started lucid dreaming. I got to the point I was astral projecting. I was talking to mediums. Like, I really thought that I had found the truth finally. And so I was going full force into it with everything I had, because I didn't have anything left, So it was really easy for me to just dive right into it. And it was exciting. So, I mean, even just lucid dreams, it's like, oh, I can fly in my dreams. For sure, I'm going to keep doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And I got so attached to it for maybe 4 or 5 years.
Wow.
It's wild.
And I guess when you kind of put them side by side too, it's, even though it's different, it's not that much different, right? It's just a different moving of the goalpost. We're in, Mormonism and the New Age. I would say if you put a lot of the beliefs between the two, some of them could be similar. So It's just sort of like switching one thing for another. Yeah.
I think I was so drawn to it too, because the Mormon church feels very religious and not at all spiritual. So it was like that was the first time I had really come into contact with something that felt genuinely spiritual. And it was like, oh my gosh, maybe this is the experience I've been looking for this whole time.
Yeah, I mean, I went through the same thing. It's like our stories are pretty similar. To be totally honest with you, our stories are very similar because it's like the same reaction to leaving the church that I had, got into occultism, things like that, and like, you know, or Buddhism. So it's just replacing that one thing for another. But in reality, I think it's valuable to point out that yourself, you have, instead of just finding something new and deciding to give, you know, 100% of your belief into this, you're constantly questioning everything about this new belief. And that is a trait that a lot of people do not have. You know, some people will just find something new and then just grab onto it and then no looking back, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I've had people before be like, because I've always been very vocal about what I believe in and what I'm looking into, the questions I'm asking, what I'm finding. And so people watched me switch from the LDS belief to the New Age belief. And it was like, okay, well, she's kind of woo-woo and weird now, but whatever she's doing. And then over time, New Age became more mainstream. And I'd have people coming to me like, what does this mean? Or can you help me with this? And I was like, yes, the true spirituality is catching on. Finally, yay. And then they also watched me transition out of that and be like, oh, because I started reading the Bible and it was like, I can compare now to the Mormon church and what they say and then what these words are saying from actual, you know, Jesus Christ or the people who are around him. So when I started transitioning away from New Age and looking at this new stuff, people would always message me and be like, why would we believe you? You're constantly changing your beliefs. And I'm like, well, shouldn't you though? Like if you find new information and you realize you were wrong about something, are you going to stick with it? Or are you going to evolve, you know?
Very good point.
Yeah.
Is there any,
That's
like, you know, I had assumed, and I'm guessing, the version of their Bible, is it like, it's not the same as ours, right?
Well,
or the same as, like, you know, a King James version, ours. But,
they will say that only the King James version is the correct translation.
Okay.
But they also have a Joseph Smith version of the Bible. So Joseph Smith basically added some of his own scriptures into the Bible and then wrote the Book of Mormon and would say, like, look back at Isaiah chapter blah, blah, blah. And it'd be like, oh, there's biblical confirmation for this. Well, little did you know, Joseph Smith wrote in that part of the Bible to make the Book of Mormon look more legitimate.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like his New Testament version, kind of like his addendum to the Old Testament.
Yeah, because I think there was something that I pulled up that was like in the book, but didn't match what the Bible had. I can't remember what it was.
Right.
Yeah. And it's so funny that they gave that, you know, people around you would kind of give you a hard time for believing in the New Age stuff and being like, oh, she's looking into woo-woo. When it's like, meanwhile, Mormonism is believing that you can become your own god on another galactic fucking planet with like 100 wives, and that doesn't sound woo-woo to anybody.
Right. No, the people at my school, when I was at TCU, I would tell them I was Mormon because at least for the first year or so, I still thought that I was. And as soon as I told them that, like, I kid you not, conversation over, back away. If they're not asking me how many moms I had, then it was like, that was that. I was an alien. Would not talk to me anymore.
Wow.
Because it was like, yeah, you hear Mormon and it's like, oh my gosh. Okay. Like, I hear that's pretty weird.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's wild, too, especially growing up, because I had always heard, because I'm in the northeastern United States, I had always heard that Mormon and LDS was so similar. So it was like it's weird. There was almost like a reverence towards Mormons and LDS. And we didn't necessarily view them as two, but it was only because we hadn't, of course, really looked into what they were believing it, you know, their beliefs were.
Right.
But I was curious just to ask real quick. So, you know, after all this time, you've gone through this journey, right? You've gone through Mormonism and New Age, and you've been able to kind of sniff out bullshit where it is and figure out what real truth to you is.
Mhm.
What has your experience been with the Bible? Like, I'm just genuinely very, very interested in that. Like, that's an interesting kind of conclusion for you to come to.
Yeah, I will definitely say that. Well, in the New Age, it was like because I started having these health issues. Like, I was really, really struggling with anxiety and depression, which was messing with my nervous system. I would be in fight or flight for like years at a time. And so my organs were shutting down. Like, I had to finish my senior year of college from my apartment bedroom. I could not walk. I could not function. And so that was kind of what led me into becoming a health coach, is I had to research, like, what's going on? How do I heal myself? Because doctors weren't helping. And I started to see all of this design in the body and like the way that the body interacts with its different parts, like it's all interconnected. It connects with nature. And of course, some of this was New Age, but there is a lot of truth in it. You know, it's like the two truths and a lie type thing. So I started seeing these connections between the body and plants and just nature and like grounding and all this different stuff. And I was like, you know what? I haven't known if a God exists, but after studying all of this, and I'd read books like The Secret Nature of Matter, and I was learning about like quantum physics and stuff. And I was like, it seems like there's so much design here. Like, I think there's got to be a God. Like, I don't think that this design can just happen purely by accident. Like, that doesn't really make sense to me. So even while in New Age and like worshiping the universe as God, I still had this growing belief that like there's got to be some sort of designer or like intelligence or a creator, like something of that sort. I think there is maybe a God, actually. So that was developing in me. And then I was always talking about the Matrix, because studying the stuff for my health, it was like, oh, doctors don't help. Nutritionists don't know what they're talking about. My food is poisoning me. My water is poisoning me. And I started seeing just the darkness in all of these different systems and how everything on earth is trying to kill you for profit.
Yeah.
And so it was like, we live in a matrix. Like, this place is literally evil. It does not want us here. It's fighting against life every step of the way. And I was okay with that for a while. Just okay with the idea of like, we live in the matrix. And so like in my mind, it was like, okay, I got to create heaven on earth. Everyone has to come and all be one together. Love and light, you know, for the whole world. Everyone can raise their consciousness and, you know, work together, become this like unity. So that was where I was for a while, but I never understood why the Matrix existed. Like, I knew that back in the days, people lived outside and ate obviously food that was good for them, and there weren't so many health issues, but I didn't really know why that changed. And so when 2020 happened, at this point, I'm very New Age. I'm very liberal. I'm like rooting for Beto O'Rourke to be president because he was from Texas. I just like thought he was awesome. And my parents were like Trump fans, and me and my parents did not get along for a while. And they would tell me like, Maddie, politics are totally rigged. I know you want Beto to win, or even Bernie Sanders. They're like, but I can promise you, I'm going to tell you right now, Bernie Sanders will not ever become president. And I was like, okay, yeah, you guys are crazy. And then I think it was literally a few days before COVID broke out, suddenly all the presidential candidates like dropped out and started endorsing Biden. And at that point, even Obama had to endorse Biden. And then suddenly everyone was just like elevating him. And I looked at my parents like, have you been right this whole time? And that was when I started to do research into more like politics and how they work. And we started researching like the Clintons and like the suicides.
Yeah.
Dude, it was so crazy. I started getting into like the trafficking. I was watching stuff like Plandemic and Out of Shadows. And just like
Understandable.
there was this whole other picture that was emerging. And so I started learning again. I had looked a little bit into it, but I started really diving into like MK Ultra, mind
Nice.
control. That was when I started realizing like, holy shit, I think that the LDS Church really is an actual cult because they're using like the same forms of mind control. And so I just started going into all of this, and I was really interested in satanic ritual abuse survivors and like trafficking survivors. And I'd watch all of these people who were now believing in Jesus Christ. And to me, it was like, oh, great, not that freaking name again. Like, I don't want to hear anything about that. But it was like, it was this pattern that kept happening. And I was like, why are these people saying that like Christ saved them? Or like, why are they saying that they have a relationship with God? Like, that makes absolutely no sense to me. And like, there would be these girls who I know went through absolute living hell on earth. And they would be like, I'm just grateful for God. And they'd read these Bible verses. And I'm like, what is this? Like, am I going to have to look into this? I really, really, really don't want to because I hate it. Because the patriarchy and old white men and all of that, you know, like Jesus wasn't even white. I don't know why that's like a thing. Everyone associates Christianity with white supremacy. And I did for a while. But so I was like, I figured out I'd been wrong about my political beliefs. I was starting to just like a little bit edge out of my New Age beliefs because I was learning about the occultism and the symbolism. And I was like, oh, a lot of this actually is connecting to my New Age beliefs. So at that point, it was like, I think I might just start listening to some people talk about the Bible. And if I'm not totally hating it, like I'll have an open mind enough to just read some stuff. And so I started just like slowly edging into the Bible. And I think one of the first things that really made me open up to it was that it finally gave me a reason for why the Matrix existed. Because up until then, it never made sense. And then it was like starting to read the Bible, or at least like listen to pastors preach about certain chapters or topics. I was like, oh my gosh, like this makes sense. The Matrix exists here because the world is fallen and it's literally run by the devil, which makes sense because I've been looking into MK Ultra and the occultism and the trafficking, and like there's always some sort of satanic element to all of this shit. And so it was like, I think I'm gonna have to pay attention to this. So that, I think that was really what kind of made me think like, I'm gonna let go of the New Age and all the occult symbolism. Because I read like Deuteronomy or something, and it talks about how, what is it, like sorcery and witchcraft and divination and all that stuff is like an abomination in God's eyes. And I was doing all of that thinking that it was of God. And it was like, oh shit, like could I be totally thinking that I'm worshiping God and be worshiping something else completely? Mm-hmm. And it scared me to see the parallels between New Age and these people who had been MK Ultra or trafficked and things like that. So I started reading the Bible, and I was very surprised that it was more spiritual than I expected. Like a lot of the similar, I think New Age takes things from the Bible and twists it. Because it's like, I would read the Bible and Jesus would talk about a new heaven and a new earth. And it's like, oh, well, I read this Eckhart Tolle book called A New Earth. And in his version, we're creating the new earth through unity. But in God's version, he's creating a new earth because this one is the Matrix, basically. And it's like, hey, get rid of that, and I'm going to create a new one where suffering doesn't exist. And I started thinking, like, I've been giving myself way too much power. Like, do I really think I'm going to bring heaven on earth? Like, I'm still just an idiot who's deceived by my political beliefs, you know? Mm. And I started feeling so much relief and just peace for not having to control my reality anymore. And like not having to be the absolute God in my own life and like manifest everything and do these affirmations and my tarot cards and meditate and do my full moon rituals, all of these things. Like all at once, I just let all of it go. And it has been so peaceful to just trust that like there's a bigger plan going on. There is something way bigger than me at play. And I feel like the more stuff I've been learning, especially about occultism, just kind of reaffirms that. And especially while looking at the LDS Church, because it's like in the Bible, well, one of the big things in the LDS Church is that families will be together forever. So one of the temple ceremonies is that you get sealed. You can get sealed to your wife or your husband, and you can also get sealed to your family, so that in heaven, you'll still be a family and you'll be together forever. But then I was reading through the Gospels in the Bible, and Jesus himself says there is no marriage in heaven. And it's like, oh my gosh, the Mormon Church has been teaching this like so hard. And Jesus doesn't even say that that's true. And so all these things just kind of like started clicking everywhere. And it was like, I just want to keep studying this and understand this so I can compare it to the LDS Church and see if maybe there is truth in that church and maybe it was just like corrupted, or if they're totally using the name of Jesus to mind control people and take their money through tithing.
Yeah.
So very long-winded answer, but that's kind of where I am right now, is I'm still studying the Bible. I'm still comparing it to the Mormon Church. I'm still studying the LDS Church's like deeper, more historical doctrine. And yeah, it's like the more I go deeper into both things, the more nefarious, evil, and demonic the LDS Church seems, especially because they go by the name of Jesus Christ and the members fully believe that they are Christian. So they don't know that there's a different gospel that Jesus actually taught in the Bible and that they're following something completely different. But then it's also worse because the people who leave the Mormon Church automatically hate Christianity.
Right.
So if Christianity is the one and only way to go to heaven or the one and only way back to God, they will never go there because the church has totally twisted it for them.
Yeah. It's pretty screwed up, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's where I'm at right now.
And I even think that Joseph Smith said that he had accomplished things more than Jesus. Doesn't he have that quote where he says I've accomplished more than Jesus did, or something along those lines?
I think he said something like that. Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I'm almost positive I heard that from somewhere else.
Yeah, I totally have it in the slide somewhere. I just don't have it offhand. But something roughly along those lines that I accomplished more than Jesus did.
Well, because he believes that he restored the gospel of Christ and that all the churches on the earth were abominations and that his is the only true church. So it's even weird that they consider themselves Christian because their own doctrine says all churches were abominations.
Right.
It's so weird.
Yeah, it's definitely very weird. And hearing your account of everything is just totally blown me away. It really has. I mean, I guess, is there anything else that you can think of that? Because the whole reason why we made the Skinwalker Ranch series is this started with a series of us being curious about a ranch in the middle of nowhere. And now, after looking into this ranch, because it had nothing to do with LDS and Mormonism, when we first researched it, we were just thinking that this was something cool to cover. And the more that we looked into it, and New York Patriot was the one who was finding these crazy connections with Mormonism and LDS, all tied to this ranch, where this ranch was getting tons of government funding,
right?
And they were looking into UFOs, but yet everyone involved in the ranch was a Mormon. And it just, name after name, document after document, they're not looking at these UFOs in the sky. In this research that we found, these documents that we got, they're looking into really wild stuff that definitely seems more occult to us than they are saying on the documents or even the new shows. Because take Brandon Fugel, for example. He's the current owner of Skinwalker. He's a lifetime LDS and Mormon member.
Mhm.
And everyone around him is, including Senator Harry Reid, who got them the funding to even be able to do this research on Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. And of course, he was a Mormon. I just want to hear from you. What similarities do you see with Mormonism and occultism, sort of in your own words? Because I think that Mormonism is hiding behind the label of Mormonism, but in reality, there's way more occultism behind it.
Right. Okay, so I feel like there could be two answers to this. The first one is that Mormon doctrine itself is pretty occult. I know that when I watched the Skinwalker Ranch TV series, Brandon was saying that, according to their beliefs, there are worlds without number. And obviously there's going to be inhabitants of these worlds. So he was saying like, yeah, I want to look into this because it kind of goes along with my Mormon beliefs that there are worlds without number. And, we're going to get to learn about potentially these other inhabitants of these other planets or universes. So it's like, there's one thing. But then the second thing, I don't know if Fugel is a Freemason, I don't know. But I do know Mormons who are also Freemasons. And like just thinking about Joseph Smith, of course he was a Freemason. He took the temple endowment ceremonies word for word, even like the actions and everything. They are from Freemason ceremonies. And they're actually the same as, I have this graphic and it shows like the Mormon words, the Mormon positions, the Freemason words, the Freemason positions. And then it says magic incantations. And they have some of the same things as these magic incantations too, like word for word, like health in thy navel, marrow of thy bones, or like something like that. So I do wonder how many people, use the term Mormon to kind of cover up that they are in something occultic in the background. And I do wonder too, how many of these people have something a lot more nefarious going on, because just recently in the news they opened up a new, kind of an old ritual abuse investigation. So these are accusations from I think the 80s, and they're bringing it back up because they've found more victims and more people who are like corroborating evidence and stories.
So this is from in Utah, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I saw
yes.
that
And
like
this
last
is in
week.
Utah County and a couple counties around us. And like I read Kathy O'Brien's book, Transformation of America. She was a MK Ultra survivor. And one of the quotes in there, I think it might have been from Dick Cheney. It was one of her handlers. And they were saying, like, people are in on this project, even the Pope and the Mormon prophet. So it's like,
Wow.
I know at this time that the Mormon church employs soft mind control, for sure. But could they be using MK Ultra on some of these people? Because there's this thing called the Pace Memorandum. This was a general authority of the church, and he was interviewing people who had the same stories of satanic ritual abuse. And he was saying, I limited myself to a single person a week, and I got 60 witnesses or 60 victims who all said pretty much the same things. And they didn't know this had happened to them until they went in the LDS temple for the first time and had flashbacks. Because it was like they were inverting the Mormon rituals to be like baptized into the satanic whatever, or I don't know. It's like they would take these religious things and make it satanic in nature. Either, maybe for occult purposes, or maybe just purely scientifically for the trauma and the mind control. I don't really know. But there is a possibility that that has been happening to a lot of Mormons around here. And, the goal of the whole MK Ultra program is for the one world order, like the New World Order, the total global dominance. And there's something going on in Utah with Mormons, and there are these connections to Freemasonry with the prophet and with current people in the church. And like my uncle, he used to work with human trafficking stuff. And he would say traffickers are the people you'd least expect. They're your teachers, they're your kids' sports coaches, they're the doctors. And I don't know. I can't help but think that like there is something deeper going on in Utah, especially around Utah County, that is a lot more nefarious at the core. And I don't know what that would have to do with the Skinwalker Ranch. I for sure need to listen to your guys' series and try and put some pieces together. But
well, to me, it seems like they're trying to prove it. They're trying to use the ranch and the research to prove their belief system, or to get funding to look into the stuff that the belief system talks about.
So do you think it really is just innocent Mormons who are so fully believing it that they want the proof?
No, I think it's a little bit of both in between. I think it's Mormons who are probably true believers, but also know more Masonic beliefs. And so they integrate the two, and then they're trying to use Mormonism stuff to prove Mason stuff. And then they're getting this different funding to do research that would prove what are in the books.
Because they don't have any other evidence. Like even the golden plates that Joseph Smith wrote the Book of Mormon from, he didn't have any plates. He used a divination rock.
Right.
So they don't have any evidence of anything. So I could for sure see them like on this quest to find something that will back up their book.
Yep.
Well, there was that
Both
one thing
books,
I even talked about, to see that NIM thing. I thought it was weird.
The what?
They found like this thing in like this, they call it this the NIM or something like that, where it's like this 2-pillared carving that they found somewhere. I think it's where Yemen used to be, but it was like in an area called NIM at the time. And, that goes back to, made me think of like the cartoon, The Secret of NIM. And then I had somebody even send me something that I think, I didn't know, there's some National Institute of Mental Health or some shit like that. And whatever it is. And its acronym is NIM as well. And I was just like, what the fuck? This is really weird.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think supposedly they also did do, at some point, somebody sent me links, actually, I think in Twitter. A listener sent me links, and they do show that at one point they did use lab rats for experiments. So, like, that even goes into the cartoon itself.
Really?
Yeah, because they were doing experiments on lab rats, and, like, they started to be able to talk and understand, and, like, they were advanced,
Wow.
Yeah, very weird.
Always right in your face without you knowing.
So, is there anything else you wanted to add or anything? I mean, I think you said a lot in that amount of time, and I think with the questions that Lux asked you, I really pretty much ain't got nothing to ask. So, is there anything else you want to add?
I don't know. I feel like it's like if my mind gets pricked with little things, I'm like, oh yeah, and also this, but I don't really have anything else at the top of my mind.
One thing I was just gonna try to show real quick. Try to get your take or your opinion on this is, so this is just a couple slides that we had used in the Skinwalker series. I'll share them with you guys now.
Nice.
So let me know if you can see that.
Yeah.
Okay, so Brandon Fugel there. We were, of course, he's a very, very devout Mormon, and everyone around him is, including the people who run the ranch, who do the research on the ranch.
Attorney General.
Again, the senator, right, like the senator. The whole thing revolves around Mormonism. So when you look at Brandon Fugel, he's got a couple different things here. One that's really important when you look at his business findings is that you see that he's the manager of something called Cypher Founders. I thought you would probably find this interesting, Maddie. Cypher Founders is a military intelligence and cyber operations group. And they do tons of different like engineering or intelligence operations. So to me, I thought that was weird, thought he was just looking into what was going on at Skinwalker Ranch. I thought this dude was into real estate. I didn't know he was into intelligence and cyber operations. But whatever. So, of course, for all those who
should
might
ask
have
him
not,
to be should ask him to be transparent on that on Twitter. You want to be
Yeah.
transparent about this company you own.
yeah, for all those too who didn't get a chance to listen to the entire series for Skinwalker, and they're like, wait a minute, Brandon Fugel, he's the current owner of Skinwalker Ranch, but you can see right down here when we're making the claims that he's a LDS or Mormon member, you can see it's documented many places, especially right down here, that he is part of LDS and Mormon Church.
Mhm.
Now, this one, Maddie, I thought you would find crazy. On the show, Skinwalker Ranch, take a look at the name of this research device that they're using to figure out what is going on at Skinwalker. Satan.
And this is Fugel doing this?
Yes.
Yo, and then I even included it on the intro on the last one. At some point, they bring in these guys. I forgot. I don't know if they were doing something with rockets or viewing or whatever. But they come in and they call themselves the like Osiris. It's like, what the fuck?
Yeah, and again, this is from the actual website right up here. Take a look.
They say this in like episode 1
skinwalkerranch.com.
too, like Satan.
Yep.
I was like, what the fuck?
Mm-hmm. So this is the name of this device that they're using to figure out what's going on at the ranch. Here it gives you like a breakdown of what this device does, but it's essentially measuring electromagnetic fields, a bunch of different sort of environmental factors that they're using for the research, including like seismic geographies and, transponder receivers, magnetic sensors. So this picture is the one I wanted to show you in particular. This is Prometheus. This is the company that runs all of the Skinwalker Ranch series. And I thought it was very weird when you look at this company, how all of the different shows that they seem to be putting up on this network are very similar. You have Ancient Aliens is on the same network. Oak Island is, Skinwalker, and they're all kind of saying the same thing, which if I'm looking at it from 100,000 feet, it really reminds me of the idea of you becoming a god and having your own earth thing.
Right.
It just comes up over and over again. Bible secrets revealed, secret societies,
Hollywood.
America's Book of Secrets, Hollywood revealed. So, Aliens and Demons Decoded. Oh, and then by the way, you have the Girls Next Door from Playboy.
Just the casual trafficking and CIA operation.
Exactly, right. Yeah, just throw that one in there. And then this is the one I really wanted you to see. So this is Fugel. This is at Skinwalker, and right behind them.
Don't tell me.
Is the square and the compass.
I thought that I saw something like that when I watched the show, like on a poster behind them in like the room that they would always.
Yeah, I think they do actually. I think you're right though. I think they actually have this picture up on the wall too.
And then there was another scene which might not be anything, but they were investigating Homestead 2.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know how much of it is staged and how much of it isn't, but they're like filming the scene where they're all really scared because something happened. And in the background, there was a mannequin in the window. Like they had placed it in there. And I just thought that was weird. Like they were trying to make the whole thing look so real and like it's a real documentation. But in one scene, the window's clear. And in the next scene, there's a mannequin in there.
Oh, whoa.
And I just thought it was weird. I noticed that. Like, why would they do that?
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of it's theatrical and they're trying to stage stuff or make things more dramatic, and like just looking at the whole situation, the Mormons, the Masons, all the stuff that we've talked about tonight, how it all ties together, and now you see this show appearing on TV, and the things that you've confirmed tonight. I hopefully our listeners will kind of see that based on your experience, that there is way more going on here in the Mormon Church than just the standard practice. I really, really appreciate you coming on, because this has been absolutely mind-blowing for me, and
Thanks.
yeah, seriously. So
Yeah, no, thank you as well. This was a really good episode. I mean, I enjoyed it. It was like have my own podcast for myself, listening to somebody. This is really good. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I think just to like close it all off, the thing about the Mormon religion is that it relates to so many other ancient mystery religions and so much of the occult, because the basis of their religion, just like all the other hidden religions, are that they're basing it off of the original lie in the Garden of Eden, where like, if you partake of this apple, you will become as God yourself. And that is exactly what the Mormon Church teaches, and that is what everything else teaches too, is like, you can become a god, you can enlighten yourself to be a god, you can find out this mystery knowledge. And that's the same thing that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is doing, but just under the name of Jesus. Ouch. Sorry, my finger.
Sorry. That's nice. All right.
that was it. Yeah, I couldn't have said that.
Yeah.
That's incredible, really.
That does kind of go into occultism.
See, we need to have people like Maddie come to do research with us, because it'll take us like a half an hour to explain something, and she just broke it down in less than 30 seconds better than we did.
Yeah, really. It's like, damn, okay.
Oh man.
So thank you very much for coming on. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. And I just want to let the listeners, or whether you're watching live or you're going to listen to this later, that I go a lot more into all of these in my course. It's called the Ex-Mormon Resource Course. I have 17 sections, each dedicated to a different thing. So one is like the history of the church, tithing, like what are they doing with the money? I go into Freemasonry. What is it? Why is it connected to the church? I go into like spotting false prophets from like a biblical standard. And yeah, I even go into, there was a case with the current prophet, right? His daughter and son-in-law were accused in the 80s or the 90s of running a ritualistic sex abuse network. And no one's heard of this. And it got brought back up in 2018, to which the prophet had women go on a social media fast, right, as it came up. I don't know why just the women, but it just seemed like odd timing. And yeah, it's just this ritualistic abuse stuff. And the accusations are saying that if the church would have acted differently, the abuse probably wouldn't have happened. But it's interesting to me that he went on to become the prophet, because in my eyes, it's always these rich people who have a lot of influence. And yeah, he basically was protecting his daughter and son-in-law. And I just wonder, again, like thinking back to this quote from the Kathy O'Brien book, Transformation of America, where they said, the Mormon prophet is in on the project. Like, I do wonder if very specific people get selected for that role, and his family is also involved, and it could be a big MK Ultra operation going on. I don't know, but they do have a lot of ties to the military and, intelligence, like you were showing with the Brandon Fugel stuff. So I don't know. There's
makes perfect
so
sense to me.
What was that?
So it makes perfect sense to me when you put it side by side. Yeah.
Yeah, especially after even just having you on. I just think it just makes more sense for me as well.
Yeah. It's scary living here, though, because it's like there could be people next to you that have undergone that kind of mind control, and you would have no idea. Or your neighbor, who you think is a great guy, could actually be running ritualistic abuse networks, or like participating in it. And there's a lot of bishops that go to jail for assaulting children in their interviews or different things like that. But when you're a bishop and you have a child alone in a room, you could do anything in there. They could do stuff, program them in the interview, and then wipe their mind so the child walks out thinking, yeah, that went great. And their mom's out there waiting like, oh, okay, like, good for you for talking to the bishop. Let's go home now. It's like, right. You really just don't even know.
Yeah. It seems like it could also be done in other religions, Catholics.
Right.
Sorry, but yeah, seems like there might be some of that MK Ultra that they've been able to share around these different religions to, mess with members, and especially the young members of the church.
Totally.
All right, so I guess we could leave it there then, right? I mean, I don't think you could have really said it any better before as well. Definitely go check out his stuff. The links are already in the show notes now on YouTube. When this show comes out on the podcast, I will definitely include all her links in there as well, so you can go check her stuff out. And our links will be in the bottom, and our Discord and all that stuff. All the links to everything will definitely be in the bottom. My show and Lux's show as well. So thank you very much for coming on, though, Maddie. And I'm sure if you ever come across more stuff and you have something else you want to present, even if you watch our series and you're like, oh my God, I have all this other stuff now coming on, let us know. You can come back on. I'd love to have you back on if you have more stuff to talk about.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a really good time. And
for whatever reason, I feel like there are going to be more things coming out.
I think so.
And I'll have more to say about it.
I actually think so too. So that's why I said it. Awesome. So I'm sure this won't be the last time we speak. And so thank you again as well. Like I said, just coming out, telling your truth and all that. I do appreciate that, and I think.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for giving me the opportunity. I feel like I've struggled, with Instagram and the censorship and all that. I've struggled to actually find like a platform that my voice can get out there, and I feel like you guys are really helping with that. So I
help
really
a little bit, yeah, definitely. I think it will. So that will work out great for sure. Awesome. So that is the end of another Occult Rejects episode. Thank you everybody for jumping in on the live. I thought that was awesome. Most of the same people. You all know who you are, but thank you anyway for jumping in. That's why we like doing it. Just watching people add to the stuff, and it's great. So thank you all as well, and that's it. That's the end of another Occult Rejects, and until the next one, everybody be well. Later.